Hey, this is Gregory Brown with RMUnicorn, the Ruby Mendicant University video log. And today I sort of want to lay out a rough picture of what I think that the future of education needs to be. And while it's been a while since I've been in primary school and I'm only lightly involved in things like college as a part-time student, I think that the institutions have been in place for a while and will continue to stay the way that they are unless major changes are made in order to radically change the way that we approach education. And in a world in which the internet has become so powerful, we should be taking some lessons from its underlying structure and the philosophies behind it. One thing that I would really like to see in education is for it to become more decentralized. So the typical experience, at least in America, is that people go to elementary school, middle school, high school, and then they go to some secondary school for college for a four-year degree. And that's either going to be a private or public school. Oftentimes, for the majority of people, it's some form of public school. Which means that throughout their educational life, they basically interact with four different institutions, and if they go the public route, then all four of them, from the time that they're very young to the time that they enter the career field, are controlled by the same organizational entities. Which means that the sort of learning that they're getting is preached in a particular style that has to meet particular standards and affords very little change and deviation from that. Now, I sort of strongly believe that while along that path you're going to run into certain topics that are super relevant to you or certain teachers that have been super inspirational to you, the fact that it is a centralized environment means that basically you've got a handful of institutions trying to give you 100% of your learning, and I think that that is a horrible model for doing things. So I would much prefer to see things move towards an environment in which students can seek out individuals or organizations that are more topically relevant to their needs in a sense, and that you can get the very best people to teach that particular topic. So what I would really love is to see an environment in which a number of organizations and individuals are accredited to teach and are held up to certain standards, and then are allowed to run their own programs, and that through the combination of all of those different programs, people can be granted a general education diploma at some point. So RMU obviously is a super hyper-focused decentralized program, and it'll continue to be. I'm a fairly expert Rubyist, and I'm teaching it as my own organization. It's not accredited in any way. It's not affiliated with any other organizations, and that means that I have full freedom to run RMU in exactly the style that I want to. And I think that this is a tremendous benefit from those who appreciate the style in which I'm teaching. So decentralization is key, and I think that's number one. Now, another thing that education needs is a greater degree of individualization. You get part of that by just decentralizing things. If you break it out into a bunch of different parallel paths through different options, then you get that individualization to some extent to begin with. But I think that it should go farther, and in the context of every course, I think that there should be a lot more focus on allowing students to come up with their own questions and their own sort of problems, and then working extensively with those students to encourage rather than discourage individualization. I think that this is key to creativity, and it's key to seeing genuine innovation in the world rather than people who are making incremental improvements along a predefined path. So individualization is really important, and that's down to the bones of what RMU is all about, seeing as there's a good degree of leeway in all the problems that we present to approach it via different ways, and that core part of the course is the one-on-one interaction with me about the problems that the student themselves have come up with. So we've got decentralization and individualization. I think those things are really, really important. Another thing that we are approaching, and that I feel is central not just to this program but to education in general, is something that sort of runs parallel with the ideas of the free software movement. You can consider it a free education movement in which I believe that educational resources and programs should be freely available. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they can't be used in a commercial setting, but that the materials themselves should be shared with the world so that they can be investigated, so that they can be critiqued, and so that they can be changed and improved, and so that they can be implemented elsewhere. So I would love to see lots and lots of open courseware. Now, some universities do this and some schools do this, but I think that that should be like a ground-up assumption that if I'm going to be learning that every bit of software that I use, that every process that is in place, that every program that I work my way through has its outline available, and this is doubly true for public things in which our tax dollars are paying for them. I believe that we should be able to know exactly what students are going through and then be able to change those things ourselves. So some sort of open content licensing and open process management for educational resources I think is paramount. Now RMU is still sort of in its beginning larval stages, so we haven't openly released a ton of open source stuff, but this transparency is part of it, and over the next several months you're going to see a ton of code come out of RMU. Everything that we use to run the courses is going to be open sourced, and hopefully our students will volunteer to open source their individual projects as well. So we'll be producing a lot of open source stuff, which is really great. And we'll be continuing to talk about the processes like we're doing right now, and I think that this is essential. I think it's key. Now, when we're talking about this free availability, I think that part of the concern that people have about this, especially private institutions and things like that, is that they need to make money somehow because they need to be self-sustainable. And I think that self-sustainability is really, really important. One of the greatest problems with the public education system is that they don't need to be self-sustainable. The money for our educational system is picked out of the back pocket of the American citizen and then given to an organization, and we have very little direct ways of impacting that organization because regardless if the way that they're using the money or not is effective, that we would have to go through the very slow, long bureaucratic process to change it. But private institutions, often through their endowments and through their tuitions and things like that, have a means to self-sustain, have a means to pay for the resources that they need. But their concern is that they want to keep those resources tight and close to their chest. But I think that's sort of a scarcity mindset. I think that really we should have more of an abundance mindset about this, which is that the more information we have available in the world and the more tools that we have to do this, the easier it's going to be for someone with a skill to be able to share it with those who would be interested in learning it. And by helping those people learn, you're not taking away from yourself, but rather creating a better environment for yourself to work in. Sustainability is key, but I think that things like, I do commercial trainings sometimes, and I do individual coaching as well, and I think that when we charge people for those things, that they're absolutely getting something that's worth their money. But I think of it more as a means to an end. The reason why I will sell my time in that sense is to be able to make time for the other things that I'd like to do in life, like things like RMU. But with this movement that I'm trying to start, I think that the key is to make these things sustainable on their own, so that I don't have to trade part of my time for a commercial venture. And I mean, you can make the argument that if you make something affordable and people can pay for it and it's worth the money, that's sustainability, but I don't see it that way. I think that really the best model for us is to rely on the kindness of our students who have taken the courses and then want to contribute back, either through volunteering time or money or resources or whatever they have available. In addition to that, I am trying to think of ways that we can build things of real value, maybe educational resources or charity events and things like that that can bring in additional resources and funds for us. So whatever it is, however we end up promoting RMU, and in the larger sense, whatever organization I make to forward this idea of free education, it needs to be self-sustainable in a way that's not trading time or effort for something else to be able to pay for our actions. It needs to be able to root it in itself. And if we're able to do that, what it does is it places a great deal of personal accountability on us to continue making the program something that is of value, direct value, enough so that people are not just willing but happy to support it. So that is really, really important. So I'm talking about the foundational factors of what new education needs, and so far we've talked about decentralization, individualization, free availability, self-sustainability, and there's one more thing that I think we need, which is that educational opportunities need to be omnipresent. That we can't just think of the idea of, I go to a time, during a period of time, or at a particular place, that's where learning happens. Learning needs to be so internalized that it's happening at all times. And we need to bring the focus to that by allowing educational opportunities, allow people to work on the things that are of real value to them. For example, why aren't there computer science programs out there? Maybe there are, and if there are, tell me. But why isn't a foundational option to get a computer science degree by working on a great project and showing that you've mastered the topics through doing something useful for the world? We spend so much time playing in this educational setting, trying to get ourselves a foundation, and we spend so much time trying to build that foundation that we don't actually build the house. And I think every educational program in the world should change so that the core focus is equipping people with the tools and techniques that they need so that they can build interesting things. And the means that you show the values of those tools and techniques is by allowing them to build interesting things. And with that, and with the 4 other things I mentioned, I think that we can change education for the better. And I'll probably go into a little bit more detail about each of them throughout the rest of the week. But for now, this is the core idea of where I want to go with RMU and with education in general.